Hello, this is Cindy Blair from the Alexandria Museum of Art. Welcome to another AMoA Art Together Tuesday. Today I bring you a conversation with landscape painter Laura Gates. Laura's work is featured in the permanent collections of the Rapides Medical Center, the First United Methodist Church, and the Alexandria Museum of Art. She has work in private collections across the country, as well as in Belgium and New Zealand. She's been juried into many art competitions, including the Tom Payton Memorial Art Competition, the 12th State Art Fields Competition, and she's been juried into September competitions several times, where she's won an honorable mention. You may have seen her paintings in AMoA's Concrete and Adrift exhibition or one of our Artists Among Us exhibitions. Laura is an accomplished artist, and we are so excited to have her share her painting process and tips with us.
I like doing vast, expansive landscapes. I spent a lot of time in the West and I really got hooked on them there. But also, when you look at the Louisiana landscape, it just goes on and on forever because so many parts of it are very flat. And then you get into the piney woods and the hills and things like that. So there's a huge amount of variety here, even though people don't think that much about variety in the Louisiana landscape. But look around and find a beauty in your own backyard or just down the road, and there's an incredible amount. But the way I usually start if I'm having to work from an image, well, first of all, whenever I'm out anywhere, I usually tend to have a sketchbook with me, but also I tend to have my little iPhone and I have literally thousands of photographs on my iPhone. And so when I'm out somewhere and I see clouds that I love, and I'm a cloud freak, I just love clouds and how incredible they are and how difficult to paint too, but also the light on the landscape and things like that. So I take lots and lots of photographs. And then I will develop paintings out of those photographs, and sometimes as references. But I always use my own personal photographs, and there's a reason for that because these are places that have meaning to me. And I think it's important that people understand that if they want to get into landscape painting, don't pick something out of a magazine because it might be really pretty and things like that, but it also probably has a copyright attached to it. And your own photographs, they're your own property. You can work from them and not have to worry about that. So, but the biggest thing is that it's a place that resonates with you. And so working from my own photos is helpful. And also, I tend to try to not blow it up. Sometimes I work from an iPad, and sometimes I'll do an entire huge painting working from my iPhone. But by cropping it, it helps me decide what proportions I'll be working with. And then the next step, I will do something called a notan, and it's a Japanese term for looking at things in just black and white. I just use a two value notan. You can go deeper than that, but I just use a two value one. And the concept behind that is you can play with the composition. And so
Yeah.
you can push things to either light or dark. And
Okay.
then if you don't like that, you can push things either way, like especially the grays, the midtones,
It
and
gives you
things.
a better idea of the composition, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
that way you end up with a better composition.
Yeah.
And then from that, I'll also draw a thumbnail. And the thumbnail is where I get into a lot more detail. But I'm sketching, I'm working from the photograph, I'm working a lot from memory and just playing with those ideas and starting to play a little bit with color too.
So if somebody's going to take a photograph and um, and paint that at home, would you say that they might want to have some kind of like memory in their head of what that place looks like? So like if I would need to brighten this, maybe this needs to be lighter over here, or do you
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yes. And also remember about if you're painting trees, like we have so many pine trees around here, um, making sure that you don't rely on the photograph because the photograph, depending on if you take it off, but usually you need to correct the perspective on it. It's parallax correction, where you have the trees going um, relatively perpendicular to the ground. Of course, you also have trees bending this way and that way. And that's the beauty of trees. But you don't want everything sort of um, being off kilter, because that throws the painting somewhat off kilter. And you may want to do that in your painting, or you might not want to do that in your painting. But I think the biggest thing for me is remembering that the photo is only a reference. And I try, I'm not always successful, but I try to use the notan and the thumbnail as the images that I'm painting from when I'm working on the bigger painting. And then if I have questions, I'll go back to the photograph, but the notan and the thumbnail, um, I should be that far along in terms of the character defining features that I'm trying to present in the painting should be, at least in terms of design and composition, be in the notan and the thumbnail. Or, those are like the Cliff's Notes version of what I'm trying to paint. I'll select the canvas, and the next thing I do after I have the canvas ready, the support that I'm going to be doing the painting on, I will tone the canvas. And it's called an imprimatura, or toning the canvas. I'm an oil painter, and as an oil painter, I could either tone the canvas in acrylic, because you can paint oils on top of acrylics, or I actually find that I really like to tone the canvas with oil. And so it's just a thin coating of oil paint. Here, I believe I used yellow ochre and maybe some Indian yellow or some kind of mixture like that. And what that does, this kind of warmth of the toned canvas will always be shining through. I know some painters who like to tone with a bluish grayish, and that sort of brings the intensity of the painting down in general. But my paintings, I'm really into color, and so some of them are really bright. And this also, it helps the colors sort of sparkle and helps the colors pop. And sometimes if I paint lightly in one area, that even shows through. So I tone the, and then I go into what we usually do of selecting a palette. And I often work with it's called a double primary limited palette. So it's white and two yellows, two reds, and two blue, warm yellow and a cooler yellow, a warm red and a cooler red. So one will be like a cadmium red light for the warm red, and then the cooler red might be an alizarin crimson. And so I'll have all of those at my disposal. I can mix all kinds of different colors, hues out of all that, and different intensities. I select my paints, and then normally what I do, because I have an entire arsenal of tubes of paint. I mean, I don't want to tell you how many tubes of paint that I have, but I'm really bad about, oh, that color is really pretty or something. And if I limit myself and select the paints in advance, then I won't be tempted to go steal something out of the other boxes. And also, if I limit myself to, let's say, a box of paint, these colors here, for instance, then the painting in the end is more harmonious, because what you're doing is mixing any colors that you need out of what you have. And so I do this on purpose because I know me, and again, it keeps me within what I need to do. And then the next step, of course, is layout and blocking in the shapes and the general contours, and blocking in the darks and figuring out where your darkest dark is going to be, your lightest light, and moving on to that, and then mixing the colors on palette. I often work with painting knives. A lot of people call them palette knives. And I have a few favorite. This used to be my all-time favorite. And now I've moved into this one as my favorite. But I also love this one to cover vast spaces of canvas. And then these are really handy. And then to mix paints, I have this one, which the shape of it's also really good for when you're doing, especially like 5x7s and really small pieces. I wanted to say, when I use the knives, I don't use a medium to mix with the paint. I only use medium when I'm working with brushes.
You do bigger shapes, and then you sort of
get smaller and smaller as you go with the details,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Yes. And I also can be one of those people who, if given the opportunity, would get out the one hair brush, as we call it. And that's why I like working with knives, because it keeps me away from that, and it keeps me away from that level of detail, because I don't want that. But for some reason, part of my mind wants to go there, and it
Yeah.
shouldn't. Like when you look at a when you're painting landscape paintings, don't think of a tree as an object. Think of it as light and shadow, as warm and cool.
Yeah.
Think of how and it's hard to remove the concept of object from your brain. And that's why, so often when we think of trees, we think of, oh, all the leaves or the needles on the pine tree or things like that. That's not what it's about. It's about the light and how the light responds. And so we're painting light, we're not painting objects at all.
Right.
Then it gets
Yeah.
to be expressive and more abstract, and that's a lot of fun. And everybody should remember to use their artistic license. This was the state gave these out years ago, and I managed to snag one and keep one for myself, but I thought it was so cool. But I
love
think,
that.
yeah, I know it's great, but I think that's one of the things, because even though I'm working within this process, magical things happen. And so I'll start off and it seems sort of stilted, and then all of a sudden it just gets freer and freer and freer. Um, so so that's how I do it, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work. It's fun.
Laura has a few more tips for us. We'll start with her advice about how inspiration comes while you're working, based on the experience of painting this beaver pond in Grant Parish, Louisiana.
And I was just really pleased with the end result of that. And that was one of those paintings I challenged myself, and I worked hard on it, but the magic just happened in it.
I
And
love that.
sometimes the magic happens, and other times it doesn't, but that's okay because you still worked.
Yeah.
And this gets me back to, there's a great quote by Chuck Close, the artist Chuck Close out of
Yeah.
New York. And because some people have asked me at different times, well, where do you go for inspiration? I have to have inspiration. I can't paint unless I have inspiration. And his quote is something to the effect of, inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us just show up and get to work.
That's right. That's
And
right.
I
Yeah.
so true. And when you show up and get to work, you work and you work, and some things turn out nicely and some things turn out really well. And other times it's like the magic just is there.
Yeah.
So, and that was one of those paintings where the magic happened. One of my tips is remember to squint, because when we squint, we automatically remove a lot of detail, and that really helps when you're developing a painting. Even when you're developing, let's say, the notan and the thumbnail, if you're working plein air or if you're working from a photograph, it doesn't matter. Just squint and it will help you figure out what you want to do in terms of the best composition, and it will also get your mind off those little tiny details like the 5 leaves over on the tree. um, squinting is really important. Even though it sounds silly, it's a very important tool to have, and
Yeah.
it's free. The next one is, if you're painting, especially with oils, try to use the best paints that you can afford, because you end up with much better results, even if you're doing little studies on boards, or they have great paper for painting on with oil, the paper. And the higher quality of paints, to me, gives you um, a better result in the end. When you're doing your artwork, just experiment. Try different things. Try different mediums. Try different techniques. Just get out there and have fun, and see where it all takes you. Then the next one, and my last one, is go to museums. Go
Yes.
see good art. Like, we have some great art at the Alexandria Museum of Art, I grew up in the Northeast, and within a couple miles of my home was a phenomenal art museum that had some incredible artwork that happened to be right across the street from my high school. So, and you learn a lot about history and about cultures. You can learn so much about the materials that are available to people over time because we're painting now with such different materials than what was available in the 1500s, for instance. But then some, we still use the same stuff. Um, but it's fascinating to use museums as look at them as material culture and study them that way and
Yeah.
study the civilizations that produce this stuff, and it's really a fun pursuit, a fun intellectual pursuit. And that's
Well,
all
I understand you have a show coming up at River Oaks.
that's right. In fact, we hung it yesterday. The technical opening is May 29th, which is tomorrow, but for people who see this next week, it's May 29th, 2020. And it will be up until about the middle of August, and it's called Here. And I was going to title it something else, but then I thought, no, here has to do, the word here is such a simple little word, but it has so many different meanings. Like, here it is, or here I am in this place. And you can go on and on with 30 different meanings of it. But all of the paintings developed from places that resonated with me. So they're all places that I've been, places that I've experienced. Um, and they're all places that actually exist in the world. And most of them are close by, but a few are out in Colorado. But I have family out there. The concept of trying to find my expression to interpret those places that I see, whether it's a momentary sighting, when I'm going down the highway, or whether I've spent some time there hiking through the place, or however it is I've experienced, there's been something about that place that struck me. And that's why I ended up taking a little photo just for memory reference and then building upon it from there and going back to my here. But I wanted to show everyone what that here is. And so here it is.
Okay, Laura, thank you so much for sharing your tips and your expertise with us this week. Thanks for everything you do in our community, Laura, and keep painting and stay safe.
Well, and thank you so much for having me. And remember, doing plein air painting, people can stand much more than 6 feet apart. So it's a great social distancing experience, but you can still spend time with your friends that way too.
Okay, so we can get outside and paint.
Yes, we can.
Thank you for joining us for another AMoA Art Together Tuesday. To learn more about Laura's art and her exhibition at River Oaks Art Center, go to lauragatesart.com, and you can find out more about that exhibitions at River Oaks if you go to riveroaksartcenter.com. All right, thanks guys. Stay safe and be well. And next week, join us to learn some art marketing tips from artist Claire Gowdy.